Hello everyone, it's Jayden from Student Pages. Hope you're all doing absolutely excellent once again. Today we are joined by the American composer Zachary Horner, who is working on Littlefoot. How's it going?
Hey man, good to be here. Thanks for having me on. What got me into it was coming from a very musical background with my family. I was just always around music and took piano lessons pretty early on and just had an interest in writing. So by the time I was 12 or 13, I had already written a bunch of solo piano tracks and got into production and learned some of those chops. And so by, I don't know, 13 or 14, I had written and produced a whole solo piano album. So anyway, there's my preface to all of this. And fast forward a little bit, I had some friends ask if they could throw some of those piano tracks on a little short film they were doing. When they asked if they could throw some tracks on there, it just kind of sparked some imagination, sparked some ideas, and I loved the idea of film composing and just wanted to kind of pursue that and see how far I could go with it. And here we are, probably, I don't know, 15 years later, and one step's led to the next, and here I am composing for feature films. So yeah, as far as my creative process though, there's so much to unpack in that. I guess I could give just maybe a 50,000 foot aerial view. Essentially, I'm the composer. I'm the invisible character in the movie, right? So I'm the unseen person or force, whatever you want to call it. And my job is to either bring about emotions that aren't necessarily seen or communicated but need to be felt, or possibly more often is just pulling out the emotions that are already being delivered and set forth by the actors or whatever's on screen. So my creative process to get to that point is firstly to listen. I mean, when I sit down with the director, we're going to be talking about his vision for the film, what he wants to see brought to life, and then a lot of conversations go into exactly how that operates. But when I sit down with a blank page, I usually look for a single instrument first that kind of sparks a creative idea behind an emotion or a message that needs to be conveyed in the scene I'm about to score. And I usually find that a single instrument or maybe a set of instruments tend to spark an idea that then just kind of catapults. Of course, all of it is work, and sometimes I don't have that burst of inspiration that just everything just flows and comes to me. I mean, I have to just get started working and pushing through any writer's block. And, motivation will come with action. So, once I get moving, often I'll find that motivation and inspiration. So the creative process feels like it's new every time. I mean, so while I say that, next project, I might find a different creative process. So it does kind of come down to project, but by and large, that's kind of a go-to creative process for me. A friend of mine, Larissa, who's a voice actress in the project, we've known each other for a few years, and I caught wind that she was involved with it, and I was like, hold on, they're redoing Land Before Time. I need to know about this, and so Larissa put me in contact with Joey a little bit, and we hit it off. And when Aaron was brought into the project, it was just a matter of finding out if there was this somewhere I could help out with, and sure enough, needed a little help with the production of the end credits track. And yeah, I mean, it's arguably my favorite childhood movie. And so, yeah, to be able to be a part of recreating it is just a little bit of a dream come true. So, yeah. Most of my projects are with directors that are in other parts of the world, and so yeah, it's just a matter of coming up with a game plan. Having some Zoom calls or phone calls or even just some detailed emails and such. I think the first thing that we worked on was for the teaser trailer, and he gave me the track that they wanted to recreate from Horner's original score, and so I got to start, working on that and building out the template and the exact EQ matches and trying to get as faithful as I could to the original. I looked for the scores. I wasn't able to exactly find the ones that I was working on. They might be out there, but for the sake of time, I didn't have the time to procure them. But it was really fun being able to just pull all of that orchestration out by ear and figure out which instruments went where and what notes they were playing, all the fun details with that. But yeah, I mean, as far as our specific workflow, yeah, for that one, it was just a matter of he sent me the clip and gave me some direction as far as timing and sync points and things in the teaser, and I got about to it, and I think we may have just had a couple of drafts maybe on that one. So as we progress into more and more important parts of the project, we'll have some more back and forth. It's pretty usual for that part of the process to have some drafts and some ideas sent around and things. So yeah, Joey and the lead animators have done a stand-up job just getting a really good template in mind. They've gotten an animatic put together with the original film and some clips in there, and then filled in some gaps here and there. But they've gotten things so organized that you're able to bring in animators all over the world and just almost, I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, so any animators on the project watching this, I value your work. But essentially, it's pretty well organized to where they're just able to come on and plug and play, so to speak. So yeah, kudos to Joey and Matthew and David for just kind of organizing everything up front. And I think that goes to show that, even in a creative process, organization is key. So it makes things move a lot smoother, especially further down the line you get. So yeah, organization is just a huge part of why things are able to work the way they are with everyone remote. I would say it's pretty similar. Aaron, of course, being the main composer on actually scoring the short film itself, might have some nuances to this, but as far as I know, which I know him as a friend, this process is going to be as faithful as possible to the original. So we're going to get into the nitty gritty of detailed orchestration and filling things out kind of the way it used to be done, not necessarily the way things are now with so much digital orchestration. Of course, we're all doing things with samples, and it's all created digitally. We're not, unless something has changed, we're not working with a real orchestra, unless y'all want to donate a bunch of money. So it's going to be a pretty similar creative process as it was to the original. As a composer, I think it's my career. I think if I got a career achievement award at the end of my life, or my career, it would be for making people cry in movies. And so I think my favorite track would probably be Whispering Winds from the original, just because of I guess the emotional impact that it had on me as a kid, but also even as an adult. But I don't know. I mean, the Great Valley Discovery track there towards the end is also just a masterpiece. So it's kind of a toss up between the two, I'd have to say. I mean, the whole thing is good. Arguably, I mean, no offense to the rest of his work, I think he's a great composer, but I feel like this could be Horner's greatest work. Honestly, I think the biggest challenge with all of that is just getting as close as possible to the original sound, because I try to put myself from the perspective of a fan, having grown up with the film, and if I were watching from the sidelines someone else recreate the music, what would I want that to sound like? And I feel like I'm coming into this with whatever part of the music I touch as like my worst critic. And I think that just being as faithful to the original orchestration and instrumentation as possible is probably the biggest challenge, because we can, mixing and getting things to sound as close as they could to a real orchestra is already a challenge on its own, but that's not necessarily the creative process. That's more the technical process. But creatively, it's I would say getting as close to the original orchestration as possible would be one of the biggest challenges. As a composer, I have like several, like 3 or 4 genres of film that I would love to touch on. So a little bit of an unfair question, but we'll go with it. I don't know. I love a lot of James Newton Howard's scores and movies that he's been a part of. So either being able to work with him or work on a project that he's done in the past, as if I were in his shoes, would be amazing. I mean, you name it. The Hunger Games, The Village, Signs, all of it. I love him. I love all of his work. But I don't know, there's also the aspect of like I love military films, and so like Michael Kamen's score for Band of Brothers is one of my favorites. So I don't know. It's a tricky question. Yeah, almost unfair question to ask a composer. Well, unfortunately, I can't talk a whole lot about it yet, but there is a project that I was honored to be able to be a part of at the end of 2024, beginning of 2025, called Florida Wild, and it is definitely one of the biggest movies, if not the biggest movie I've ever been a part of. And details are NDA and coming out soon. But yeah, I'm definitely excited for the world to see that. Got to work with a real orchestra and a whole team, and it was such a an amazing experience, both career wise and creatively wise, if that's a word, creatively wise. So yeah, Florida Wild is amazing, but I also had the immense pleasure to do a film called Disciples in the Moonlight, and kind of harkening back to my adoration of James Newton Howard, that kind of touched on that genre of music that I had a really fun time doing. It's kind of that hybrid orchestral thriller yet almost nostalgic sounding score. So yeah, that was a really fun project to be a part of. But yeah, those two are big career highlights for me, I would say so far. I mean, there are so many others I could name, but those are kind of some of the biggest. I guess they're feature films, so people tend to, you know, notice the feature films first. I just walked into the studio that morning and was just like, look, I'm a kid in a candy store. Y'all are gonna have to, everyone here is on alert to listen for any mistakes because I'm just gonna be basking in all of this all day, and mistakes are probably gonna fly right past me just because I'm, excited to be here. But yeah, standing on the podium in front of my own orchestra, hearing them play notes that I thought up here in my, my little studio, in the middle of the night was surreal. It's an amazing experience. So yeah. No, Littlefoot is, I think it's just going to be a very tasteful remake. Everyone has their opinions on remakes, and I do too, but I think that people are going to really enjoy this just because it's not a it's not the full film being remade. It's a short adaptation. So it's just going to be hitting on some of the highlights of the feature film and the story. So if anything, it's just going to be a fun, however long it ends up being, 15 minutes to just reminisce and reconnect with nostalgia and childhood, and who knows what that very powerful combination could bring about for a lot of people. I think that we tend to get caught up in the here and now, and sometimes lose sight of where we've come from, and maybe this will help people to be able to reconnect with parts of themselves that they've not visited in a while. So yeah, I think even that aside, that emotional aspect of it aside, I mean, it's going to be just a fun little film. The animation is really cool. The guys and gals are working really hard to be faithful to the original animation, and character faces and expressions and colors and all of it, but also throwing a little bit of a modern, fresh look on it. So I think it's just going to be a really fun 10, 15, 20 minutes of your life to be able to just, you know, enjoy the work that a bunch of essentially fans of the project have just poured some blood, sweat, and tears into for a couple of years. And that's a good one because, especially for like you said, students kind of getting started in this world, that's an important one to work through on your own pretty early on, because you're going to have inevitably, for those that want to make this a lifelong career, you're going to have to pay your dues. You're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to do things for free or dirt cheap. And so there's going to be a little bit of a take what you can get process that you're going to go through in the very beginning. But that's still a beautiful foundation for learning so many good skills. Even if the project you are, coming onto is trash, and there's really no nice way to put that. Let your music be the best part of it, and know that at the end of the day, you did your best, and you tried hard, you learned lessons. Because I'm only 15 years into music pretty seriously, and even still, I mean, every new project I'm going into it wondering what I'm going to learn, what I'm going to be able to take with me to the next project and apply so that I can be just a little bit more efficient, just a little bit more creative, just a little bit more whatever. So I guess with that context, to answer your question about, what do I look for when I'm choosing a project? I mean, there is always the aspect of can I serve this project well? Can I bring something to the table that will help this particular project communicate its story better? And if that answer is yes, then I would try my best to be a part of it. But if there's no personal connection, if there's no creative spark or anything to the project, then you have to weigh out, would I be a dead weight? Would I be a drag on the project? And so, there are those aspects of choosing a project that are important. At the end of the day, I'm not going to be a part of uh, not every project I'm going to be a part of is going to be something that I'm like, wow, this is, my favorite project I've ever worked on. I connect with it so well. I mean, at the end of the day, it is still work, so to speak. It's fun work. I mean, it's my passion. I still have fun in the process of getting to write music, but you know, not every film is going to be my absolute favorite film to be a part of. But yeah, I would say, looking for connections to it, and that's also going to go a long way with the creators of the project, because if they see someone that's invested in their story that they've poured their heart and soul into to to tell and create, that's going to be a huge motivation to want to bring you on board. So I mean, after that, I mean, you could consider things like, what would this do for my repertoire? What would this do for my overall brand? There is that small aspect, I would say fairly small. Honestly, some of the advice that I was given very early on is something that I would just continue to pass on, which is, you can't expect to start a career working with the best people in the industry, obviously. So I would say, especially for students, look for other filmmaking friends and students, or, students at other schools, or even if they're not in a school, just young filmmakers looking to get their start in the industry, and build relationships. Because at the end of the day, arguably in any industry, but since we're here talking about the creative industry, it's so relational. Your
Mm.
network is your net worth, as a good friend of mine says. And, you know, knowing people and being, a fun or approachable creative person goes a long way. And, if you're just, no fun to be a part of, or no fun to be around, then, obviously you're going to have difficulty in this in this industry. But yeah, I would just always recommend that young people look for other young filmmakers in similar, um, you know, I guess, a similar level to them, and build relationships, because you never know where the next Steven Spielberg is going to come, emerge from. He's got to be a student at some point. He's got to be a young person at some point. And so, yeah, I mean, at this point, some of my I guess best clients are friends, and we're not just working together on projects. We're keeping up personally, and we have a relationship there. So yeah, relationship is key in this industry, and starting out with people that are in your league, so to speak, is really valuable. But yeah, just keep the momentum. After that point, just work on any projects you can with other young filmmakers. If you can get repeat clients, great. You can build relationships as you both grow in your creative processes. But then, eventually word of mouth will start spreading, and that does a lot for you. The only other thing that I can imagine, or think of, would be getting into festivals, just getting out
Mm.
into public events that other filmmakers are going to be at, and throwing business cards everywhere, meeting as many people as you can, and being very personal, and following up with people. But there's also that fine balance of, you don't want to spam people, so be respectful. Thanks for reaching out, and this was fun. And yeah, thanks again.